Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the USADA Pitch, where we explore news, projects, and changes in the anti-doping world. Today, we're talking about a recent study on the substances that are used to promote growth of livestock in the United States. So these substances are often prohibited in sport, but may remain in trace amounts in meats. I'm joined today by our Chief Science Officer, Dr. Matt Fedoruk, who is very familiar with the study due to his involvement, and he can help explain more about the research and why it's so important to athletes. So welcome, Matt.
Thanks, Avery. It's great to be back on the pitch with you.
Yes, I'm thrilled to have you and to be talking about this important study. So to begin, what sparked this research?
Yeah, as the listeners may know, that anabolic agents that appear on the prohibited list may also be used in the animal husbandry or meat production industry. And they may be used legally or illegally, depending on the country. And these residues, as you mentioned in your intro, may appear in meat and can lead to positive anti-doping tests. So our goal with this study was really to try to understand in the United States what these residue levels may, how they may occur, what they are in the retail food supply. And as you know, the US geographical area is quite large. So we wanted to get a sampling from across the United States to try to understand if we could detect these in the retail meat supply.
That's awesome. And it's an important topic. And can you dig in a little bit more into who was involved in this big of a study, and what were some of the key considerations as you were developing the parameters and making sure that you checked all the uh, T's and dotted all the I's?
Yeah, this study was funded by the Partnership for Clean Competition, and this was a really important research collaboration between Texas Tech University. So there's an expert in meat biology and muscle biology there. His name is Dr. Bradley Johnson, as well as the UCLA Olympic Analytical Laboratory, Ellie Ahrens and his team there, that they analyze athlete samples, and they were involved as a collaborator in this project. The project went on for over a year. It actually is also continuing, and we were really aiming to, as I mentioned, try to find whether these expected veterinary drug residues may be present in meat. And we also were looking for unexpected anabolic agents. So we expanded our scope beyond just what we may expect to see. And we were looking for additional anabolic agents that appear on the prohibited list as well. The retail food supply is obviously the most relevant because athletes may be buying meat from various grocery stores or other suppliers. And so we were able to collect over 50 samples and analyze them for residues.
Wow. All right. So can you talk us through the findings and what they mean for athletes, what they can take away from this?
Yeah, great question. So we analyzed for a whole menu of prohibited substances, but in the United States, there are a couple of substances that are legal to be used in meat production. So those substances are trenbolone as well as ractopamine. And we did find low levels of both of those in a small percentage of the meat that we sampled. They were far below the maximum residue limits that are set by the US Department of Agriculture. And these substances are monitored, and there are rules around their use and the way that they're administered to animals. And so these findings were consistent with what we expected. Our detection sensitivity was extremely high, but importantly, the levels were far below what kind of maximum residue limits are permitted in meat. In addition, we didn't find any unexpected or illegal growth promoters in the meat. So that was comforting as well. The project is ongoing. We want to sample a larger sample size, and we also want to look at different retail and wholesale meats that may be imported into the US from other countries, because this is an ongoing concern. There are certain suppliers or countries that are permitted to export meat to the United States. So we want to get an idea of if there's any additional risks there.
Yeah. So bottom line from phase one of the study, is this good news for athletes?
I think it's good news for athletes. It gives us comfort that we didn't find in the meat sampling that we did any extremely high levels that we would consider of extreme risk to athletes. Obviously, we want to expand the sample size. As you know, there's probably tens or hundreds of thousands of grocery stores around the United States. So this was a relatively small initial sample size. So we were continuing the project. We also want to look at different organs. So not just muscle, but we want to look in liver as well and some organs to try to understand how the levels may vary depending on the different kinds of meat that are available. And so we're really looking forward to kind of phase two of this project and ongoing. We did publish the initial findings, so it is available in the public peer-reviewed domain, a paper around this particular issue.
Yeah, and we'll make sure to share that out too. All right, with all this in mind, what's the guidance at this point for athletes, both in the US and when they're traveling internationally?
Yeah, in the United States, our guidance to athletes is that the US meat supply is extremely safe, and a positive test from consuming meat would be exceedingly rare. So, from a risk perspective, I think the risk is very low. Athletes can further reduce their risk by consuming hormone-free meat or organic meat. So, we would encourage athletes, if they're eating beef, chicken, or pork, to look for those labels on the packaging that it's raised hormone free. And then when athletes are traveling to other countries, particularly high risk countries, China, Guatemala, Mexico, where there has been problems, we advise athletes to keep a food log of where they've eaten, even take pictures of what they've eaten, as well as avoid eating in high risk areas. So don't eat meat off of the street, off of food stalls. And you can also consider eating alternative protein sources. So you could eat nut-based protein sources, or even take your own protein sources while you travel in order to further reduce your risk. When athletes are traveling to the European Union, they have very strict hormone use controls there. So the risks are extremely low in countries in Europe. So athletes, I think they don't need to worry when they travel to Europe.
And I think just worth doubling back on, it's the organ based and exotic meats that are most troublesome abroad.
Yeah, so I would avoid eating meats that you're not used to, or eating liver or other organ-derived meats, because these organs tend to concentrate toxins or residues. So avoid those and focus on normal muscle tissue, chicken breast, those types of meat, steaks that aren't organ derived.
Awesome. Well, I think we can wrap up on that. Thank you so much, Matt.
Yeah, thanks very much, Avery. Pleasure to be back on the pitch today.
Awesome. Well, stay tuned, everyone, for more episodes of the USADA Pitch coming soon.